Memphis, March 15th, 1972, a blind 12-year-old girl walked onto the stage of the Mid-South Coliseum charity talent show. What happened when she sang "Can't Help Falling in Love" stopped Elvis Presley cold in his seat, and what he did next became one of the most beautiful moments in music history. This story reveals the moment when Elvis discovered that his music had given someone the courage to overcome impossible odds, and how a young girl's voice reminded him why he became a performer in the first place. Subscribe to Elvis Presley Legacy Stories, because these hidden chapters show us that music's greatest power isn't fame or fortune, it's the ability to heal and inspire. And if this story moves you, share it with someone who needs to remember that our greatest limitations can become our greatest strengths. The Mid-South Coliseum was buzzing with anticipation that Tuesday evening. The annual Memphis Cares charity talent show had become one of the city's most beloved events, raising funds for local children's hospitals and schools. This year, however, was special. Word had leaked that Elvis Presley himself would be in attendance, sitting quietly in the audience rather than performing. Elvis had arrived early, slipping in through a side entrance with Joe Esposito and Charlie Hodge. He wore dark sunglasses and a simple black suit, hoping to blend into the crowd and enjoy the show without causing a distraction. He loved these community events, loved seeing everyday people share their talents, loved being reminded of his own humble beginnings when he was just a kid from Tupelo with a dream. The Coliseum held about 10,000 people that night, and every seat was filled. Families sat together eating popcorn and cotton candy, children waving homemade signs for their favorite contestants. The atmosphere was festive and warm, filled with the kind of genuine community spirit that Elvis had always cherished about Memphis. But what Elvis didn't know yet was one performer was about to change his life forever. Sarah Mitchell was 12 years old and had been blind since birth. Born with a rare genetic condition called Leber congenital amaurosis, she had never seen a sunset, never seen her mother's face, never seen the world that surrounded her. But what Sarah lacked in sight, she made up for in an extraordinary gift, a voice that seemed to carry light itself. Sarah had been singing since she was 3 years old. Her mother, Patricia Mitchell, a single parent working 2 jobs to support them, would often find Sarah in her room singing along to the radio, perfectly mimicking every note and inflection. By age 5, Sarah could harmonize. By age 7, she was writing her own melodies. By 12, she had a voice that made grown men cry. But Sarah had never performed in front of more than her church congregation. The idea of singing for thousands of people terrified her. The stage was already a frightening place for someone who couldn't see where they were walking, couldn't gauge the audience's reaction through visual cues, couldn't orient themselves in space the way sighted performers could. Her music teacher, Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, had been the one to convince Sarah to enter the talent show. "Sarah," she had said gently, "you have a gift. And gifts aren't meant to be hidden away. They're meant to be shared. Wait until you see what happened next." Backstage at the Mid-South Coliseum, Sarah stood with her mother, her white cane folded and tucked into her bag. She was contestant number 17, scheduled to perform midway through the 3-hour show. Her small hands were trembling, and she kept running through the lyrics in her mind, terrified she would forget them. "Mama," Sarah whispered, her sightless eyes turned toward where she heard her mother's breathing. "What if I fall? What if I can't find the microphone? What if everyone laughs?" Patricia knelt down and took her daughter's hands. "Baby, listen to me. You're going to walk out there, and I'll be counting your steps with you from the wings. When you reach the microphone, I'll tell you. And as for people laughing, Sarah, when you open your mouth and sing, they won't be laughing. They'll be listening to an angel." Sarah had chosen to sing "Can't Help Falling in Love," her favorite Elvis song. She had listened to it hundreds of times, studying every nuance of Elvis's performance, understanding how he used his voice to convey vulnerability and strength simultaneously. She didn't know that Elvis himself was sitting in the audience. If she had known, she might not have had the courage to go on. The MC, a local radio personality named Bobby the Voice Williams, was introducing acts with his characteristic enthusiasm. Jugglers, dancers, young rock bands, comedians. The show featured the full spectrum of Memphis talent. The audience was engaged and supportive, applauding every performer generously. But the real shock was still coming. Elvis was enjoying himself immensely. He had already seen several impressive acts, a young, breakdancing crew that reminded him of his own youthful energy, an elderly man playing blues harmonica with such soul it gave Elvis chills, a comedy duo whose timing was impeccable. "This is great, man," Elvis whispered to Joe Esposito. "This This is real talent. No record companies, no producers, just people doing what they love. Joe nodded. Reminds you of the Louisiana hayride days, doesn't it? Elvis smiled at the memory. Those early days when he was just a kid with a guitar, nervous and excited, performing for anyone who would listen. Before the fame, before the movies, before everything became so complicated. The MC's voice boomed through the Coliseum speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, our next performer is a very special young lady. At just 12 years old, Sarah Mitchell has already overcome more challenges than most of us face in a lifetime. Sarah was born blind, but she's never let that stop her from pursuing her passion for music. Tonight, she's going to sing for us. Please give a warm Memphis welcome to Sarah Mitchell. Elvis sat up straighter in his seat, his attention suddenly laser-focused on the stage. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. Sarah walked onto that massive stage with her mother counting steps from the wings. 10 steps forward, baby. That's it. 9, 8, 7. The audience watched in respectful silence as this small, thin girl in a simple blue dress made her way carefully across the stage. Her movements were cautious but determined, one hand extended slightly in front of her, feeling for the air currents. That might tell her where the microphone stand was located. When she reached the microphone, she stopped and smiled in the general direction of the audience. She couldn't see the 10,000 people watching her, couldn't see the bright stage lights, couldn't see Elvis Presley sitting 15 rows back with tears already forming in his eyes. "Hello," Sarah said, her voice small but clear through the sound system. "My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm going to sing Can't Help Falling in Love. This song means everything to me because it reminds me that even when we can't see what's ahead, we can still move forward with love and faith." Elvis felt something break open in his chest. This child, this brave, beautiful child, was about to sing one of his songs. He gripped the armrests of his seat, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Don't miss this crucial detail. The backing track started, a simple piano arrangement that filled the Coliseum with those familiar, haunting opening chords. Sarah took a breath, and then she began to sing. Wise men say only fools rush in. The voice that came out of that 12-year-old girl's mouth was nothing short of miraculous. It wasn't just technically proficient, though it was that. It wasn't just emotionally resonant, though it was that too. It was something more. It was as if Sarah was channeling every ounce of love, hope and determination she had ever felt into those notes. Elvis stopped breathing. In 20 years of performing, in thousands of concerts, he had heard countless people sing his songs, but he had never heard anything like this. "But I can't help falling in love with you." Sarah's voice soared through the Coliseum like a bird in flight, and every person in that audience felt it in their bones. This wasn't a performance anymore. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered truth. This blind girl was showing them all what it meant to see with your heart instead of your eyes. What you're about to witness will blow your mind. Elvis felt tears streaming down his face, and he didn't care who saw them. Joe Esposito looked over and saw his boss, the king of rock and roll, openly weeping. Charlie Hodge had his hand over his mouth, his own eyes wet. "Shall I stay? Would it be a sin?" The audience was completely silent, except for Sarah's voice. Hardened construction workers were crying. Businessmen in suits were wiping their eyes. Mothers held their children closer. Even the stagehands in the wings had stopped working to listen. But the most shocking thing was, Sarah wasn't just singing the song. She was living it, breathing it, transforming it into something new, while honoring everything it had always been. As Sarah reached the bridge of the song, something extraordinary happened. Her voice, already powerful, seemed to gain even more strength and clarity. It was as if the act of performing, of sharing her gift with these thousands of strangers, was unlocking something inside her that had been waiting to be released. "Take my hand, take my whole life too." Elvis stood up. He couldn't help himself. He was on his feet, tears streaming down his face, watching this child pour her entire soul into his song. People around him turned to look, recognizing him even through the sunglasses, but he didn't notice. All he could see was Sarah. "For I can't help falling in love with you." Sarah held the final note, her young voice carrying it with a maturity and depth that seemed impossible from someone so young. The note hung in the air like a prayer, like a promise, like hope itself made audible. When she finished, there was a moment of absolute silence. The entire Coliseum held its breath, suspended in the aftermath of what they had just witnessed. That's when the real magic began. The applause started like thunder. 10,000 people leaping to their feet simultaneously, the sound so loud it was almost physical. People were screaming, crying, applauding so hard their hands hurt. The standing ovation went on and on. 5 minutes, then 6, then 7. Sarah stood at the microphone, unable to see the response, but able to hear it and feel it through the vibrations in the stage beneath her feet. She smiled, tears running down her own cheeks, overwhelmed by the love washing over her from this invisible audience. Her mother ran onto the stage, wrapping Sarah in her arms, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously. The audience's ovation grew even louder at this display of mother-daughter love. But Elvis wasn't satisfied with just applauding. Something inside him knew that this moment required more, that Sarah deserved more than just anonymous appreciation from a crowd. She deserved to know that her courage and talent had touched the heart of the man who had written the song she had just transformed into something holy. You won't believe what happened next. Elvis started moving toward the stage. Joe and Charlie tried to follow him, but he waved them back. "I need to do this alone," he said. Sarah and her mother had started to walk off stage when they heard a commotion in the audience. The applause changed character, became mixed with gasps and excited whispers. Something was happening, but Sarah couldn't see what it was. "Mama, what's going on?" Sarah asked, confused by the shift in energy. Before Patricia could answer, a voice came from behind them, a voice that every person in that Coliseum would recognize anywhere. "Excuse me, Miss Sarah." Sarah froze. She knew that voice. She had listened to it countless times on records, studied every nuance and inflection. But it couldn't be. It was impossible. She turned slowly toward the voice, her sightless eyes wide with disbelief. Mr. Presley." Elvis walked onto the stage, fully visible now to the entire audience. The ovation that had begun to die down erupted again, people screaming and crying as they realized what they were about to witness. "Here's where the miracle happened." "Yes, ma'am," Elvis said softly, approaching Sarah with the gentle caution of someone approaching something precious and fragile. "I was in the audience tonight, and I just heard you sing my song." Sarah's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Her mother steadied her, Patricia's own face showing complete shock. Elvis Presley. The Elvis Presley was standing on stage, talking to her daughter. I'm so sorry," Sarah stammered, suddenly terrified. "I hope I didn't ruin your song. I know I'm not as good as you. I know I probably didn't do it right." "Stop right there," Elvis said, and his voice carried through the sound system to every corner of the Coliseum. "Sarah, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me clearly, okay?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Elvis knelt down so he was at Sarah's eye level, even though he knew she couldn't see him. Something about the gesture felt important, felt right. "Sarah, I've been singing that song for years. I've performed it hundreds of times in concerts, recorded it, heard other people cover it, but I have never, and I mean never, heard anyone sing it the way you just did." Everyone learned the truth, but the real shock was still coming. "You didn't ruin my song, honey. You gave it back to me. You reminded me what it was supposed to mean. When I wrote those words, I was thinking about love and faith and taking chances. But you lived every single word of that song up here tonight." Sarah was crying openly now, her small body shaking with emotion. "Really? You really mean that?" "I mean every word," Elvis said, his own voice thick with tears. "You know what the difference is between a good singer and a great one? A good singer can hit all the right notes. A great singer makes you feel something you've never felt before. Sarah, you're not just great. You're extraordinary." The audience was silent again, hanging on every word of this conversation between two artists separated by age, experience, and fame, but connected by the universal language of music. But wait, there's more to this story. Elvis stood up and turned to address the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, I came here tonight to watch talented people share their gifts. I had no intention of performing. But standing here with Sarah, I realized that some moments are too important to let pass by." He turned back to Sarah. "Miss Sarah, would you do me the honor of singing that song with me? Right now, right here, in front of all these fine people." Sarah's mouth fell open. Sing with Elvis Presley? It was impossible. It was a dream. It couldn't be real. I mean, yes, of course. Elvis smiled that famous smile and gestured to the sound booth. "Can we get that backing track one more time?" As the music started again, Elvis took Sarah's hand and guided her to center stage. He showed her where the microphone was, positioned himself beside her, and then did something that nobody expected. What came next changed everything. Instead of taking the lead vocals as everyone assumed he would, Elvis began harmonizing with Sarah. He let her voice stay primary, let her interpretation remain the heart of the performance, while he added depth and support beneath it. It wasn't Elvis featuring Sarah. It was Sarah featuring Elvis. Wise men say only fools rush in. Their voices blended in a way that seemed impossible. Sarah's pure, clear soprano with Elvis's rich, powerful baritone created harmonies that had never existed before. The audience watched in awe as these two performers, one at the beginning of her journey, one at the height of his fame, found perfect musical unity. Hold on, this story has an incredible continuation. As they sang together, something magical happened. Sarah, who had been terrified and cautious when she first walked onto the stage, now moved with confidence and joy. She could feel Elvis beside her, could use his presence as an anchor point in the spatial darkness she lived in. She was no longer afraid. But I can't help falling in love with you. Elvis watched her face as they sang, saw the pure happiness radiating from her features, and felt his own heart swell with an emotion he couldn't quite name. This was why he had become a performer, not for the fame or the money or the screaming fans, but for moments like this, when music could transform fear into courage, isolation into connection, darkness into light. Like a river flows, surely to the sea. The audience was not just watching a performance anymore. They were witnessing something rare and precious, the passing of a torch, the acknowledgement from one generation to the next, the recognition that talent and heart transcend all barriers. Darling, so it goes, some things are meant to be. As they approached the final chorus, Elvis did something that stunned everyone in the Coliseum. He stepped back slightly from the microphone, letting Sarah's voice carry the final notes alone, letting her have the moment she had earned. What happened next changed entertainment history. Take my hand, take my whole life too. Sarah sang the last line alone, her voice soaring higher and stronger than it had before, filled with a confidence and joy that hadn't been there at the beginning of the performance. Elvis stood beside her, mouthing the words but not singing them, letting Sarah's voice be the only sound in that massive space. For I can't help falling in love with you. She held the final note and Elvis held his breath, watching this brave young girl claim her moment, own her power, show the world what she was capable of when fear gave way to faith. When the note finally faded, the Coliseum exploded. The ovation was louder than before, longer than before, more emotional than before. People were standing on their seats, waving, crying, screaming. Some were embracing strangers. Some were calling out to God. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something they would tell their grandchildren about. Elvis wrapped Sarah in a hug, and she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. You did it, he whispered in her ear, quiet enough that the microphones didn't catch it. You were perfect. What would you have done? When faced with such pure talent and courage, Elvis chose to elevate rather than overshadow, to support rather than dominate. When Sarah and Elvis finally left the stage, the talent show effectively ended. The MC tried to continue with the remaining acts, but everyone knew nothing could follow what had just happened. The organizers made the decision to end early, declaring Sarah the unanimous winner of the competition. Backstage, Elvis spent 20 minutes with Sarah and her mother. He asked Sarah about her life, her dreams, her challenges. He listened to Patricia talk about the struggles of raising a blind child alone, the medical bills, the constant worry about Sarah's future. Before he left, Elvis did something that remained private for years. He wrote a personal check to Patricia Mitchell for $50,000, enough to cover Sarah's education, music lessons, and medical care for years to come. He also arranged for her to receive ongoing vocal coaching from some of the best teachers in Memphis. This isn't charity, Elvis told Patricia quietly. This is an investment in someone who deserves every opportunity to share her gift with the world. You need to know this incredible detail. News of what happened at the Mid-South Coliseum that night spread quickly through Memphis and then nationally. Television news programs aired footage of the performance. Newspapers ran front-page stories. But more importantly, the story touched hearts around the world. Thousands of letters poured into the Coliseum in Graceland from parents of children with disabilities, thanking Elvis for recognizing Sarah's talent rather than focusing on her limitation. The performance became a catalyst for conversations about accessibility in the arts and the importance of supporting performers with disabilities. Sarah Mitchell went on to become a successful recording artist, releasing 3 albums over the next decade. She never achieved Elvis-level fame, but that was never the point. She made a living doing what she loved, inspiring others, and proving that disability doesn't determine destiny. Years later, Sammy Davis Jr. revealed what Elvis had told him privately about that night. "Sammy, I thought I understood what music music could do, but that little blind girl showed me I'd only scratched the surface. She sang with her whole heart, because that's all she had to navigate the world with. That's what real performing is supposed to be. But the most touching moment was still to come. When Elvis died in 1977, Sarah Mitchell was 19 years old and preparing for her first major concert tour. She was devastated by the news, feeling like she had lost not just a musical influence but a personal friend and mentor. At Elvis's funeral, Priscilla Presley personally invited Sarah to attend and, if she felt able, to perform. Sarah stood at Elvis's grave at Graceland and sang "Can't Help Falling in Love" one more time, her voice carrying across the grounds where thousands of mourners stood in silence. It was a moment of closure and tribute, a student honoring her teacher, a young artist acknowledging the man who had given her the confidence to pursue her dreams. Wait until you hear what happened after. After the funeral, Priscilla gave Sarah a gift from Elvis that he had left in his will, the microphone they had used together that night at the Mid-South Coliseum. Elvis had kept it all those years, had written a note that was found after his death. For Sarah Mitchell, who taught the king how to really sing, incredible revelation coming up. That March night in 1972 profoundly affected Elvis in ways that those close to him noticed immediately. According to Charlie Hodge, after hearing Sarah sing, Elvis became more intentional about seeking out genuine talent, especially in young performers who reminded him of his own struggles. Joe Esposito later revealed that Elvis had established a private scholarship fund for young musicians facing significant challenges, whether physical disabilities, financial hardships, or other barriers. The fund was kept anonymous during Elvis's lifetime, but provided opportunities for dozens of aspiring artists. Sarah reminded Elvis why he fell in love with music in the first place. Joe explained, "It wasn't about being the biggest star or having hit records. It was about connecting with people, moving them, making them feel something real." The performance is now studied in music schools as an example of how established artists can use their platform to elevate emerging talent. It demonstrated that true artistry includes generosity, recognition of excellence regardless of source, and the willingness to share the spotlight. Here's something most people don't know. The original recording of Sarah's solo performance and her duet with Elvis was preserved by the Mid-South Coliseum's technical crew. For years it remained in private archives. But in 1997, with Sarah's permission, it was released as part of a charity album benefiting organizations that provide music education to children with disabilities. The album raised over $2 million. Everything seemed finished, but then Sarah Mitchell continues her work today, now 65 years old, as a vocal coach and advocate for accessible music education. She runs the Sarah Mitchell Foundation for the Arts, providing instruments, lessons, and performance opportunities for young people with disabilities. The foundation's motto, taken from what Elvis told her that night, is displayed at its headquarters. "You didn't ruin the song, you gave it back to me." Every year on March 15th, the anniversary of that legendary performance, the foundation hosts a free concert at the Mid-South Coliseum, now the Landers Center, where young performers with disabilities showcase their talents. The event is called the Elvis and Sarah Legacy Concert, and it draws thousands of attendees annually. The phone rang and everything changed. No, that's metaphorical, but the impact of that 1972 night changed countless lives and continues to create opportunities for young artists who might otherwise never get a chance to share their gifts. What we can learn. The story of Elvis and Sarah Mitchell teaches us that greatness isn't just about talent. It's about recognizing talent in others and using your platform to elevate them. It shows us that our greatest limitations can become our greatest strengths when we have the courage to pursue our passions despite fear. Elvis could have simply applauded from his seat. He could have sent Sarah a congratulatory note later. He could have acknowledged her talent privately without making a public display. Instead, he chose to put his own fame and reputation behind a 12-year-old blind girl who needed someone to believe in her. Sarah could have let her blindness stop her from ever walking onto that stage. She could have let fear and self-doubt convince her that performing was too dangerous, too risky, too difficult. Instead, she chose courage over comfort, possibility over safety, and in doing so, she changed not just her own life, but the life of the king of rock and roll. Almost 50 23 years later, people still talk about the night a blind girl taught Elvis Presley how to truly see. It wasn't just a beautiful performance. It was a demonstration of how music transcends every boundary, how courage inspires courage, and how the willingness to be vulnerable in pursuit of your dreams can change the world. In a world that often focuses on what we lack rather than what we possess, this story reminds us that our greatest gifts often come wrapped in unexpected packages. Sarah's blindness didn't prevent her from being an extraordinary musician. In some ways, it made her one, forcing her to develop other senses, to listen more carefully, to feel music more deeply. That's why this story matters. It reminds us that true strength comes not from having no limitations, but from refusing to let our limitations define us. It shows us that real kings don't just sit on thrones, they kneel down to lift others up. That March night in 1972, Sarah Mitchell walked onto a stage she couldn't see and sang a song she could only feel, showing 10,000 people and one king. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward despite it. Elvis Presley, who had everything the world could offer, learned from a 12-year-old blind girl that the most valuable gift we can give isn't applause or money or fame. It's recognition, encouragement, and the willingness to share our spotlight with those who deserve to shine. If this story moved you, remember that we all have opportunities to recognize excellence in unexpected places, to encourage courage in those who doubt themselves, to use whatever platform we have to lift others up. Subscribe to Elvis Presley Legacy, stories to discover more moments when the king showed us that true royalty is measured not by the crown you wear, but by the hearts you touch. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that their greatest limitation might be hiding their greatest strength, because that's what Sarah taught Elvis and what Elvis taught us all.